Hello, I'm Kads, and welcome back to the free-to-play review. So today's topic is going to be the latest iteration of my least favorite event in the game, the Deck of Fate, specifically the Master Deck of Fate. Yes, this is one of the Decks of Fate that does include a guaranteed champion, that being Basim ibn Ishaq, one of the, of course, Assassin's Creed, or Assassins from Assassin's Creed, part of the collaboration between Raid and Assassin's Creed. Now, this particular Deck of Fate is a combination between Gear Hunters, aka Dungeon Divers, and a Soul Rush. Of course, the Soul Rush is the predominant way to gain points towards the card flips, but nonetheless, you can earn some credit. As you can see here, I've earned some credit thus far by just farming the dungeons and or the campaign. So for anyone who's unfamiliar with Decks of Fate, there are 40 cards in every single deck, and it costs 1,000, I guess, feathers in this case, per flip, i.e. you would need 40,000 feathers to flip all the cards in the deck. And then each of the cards are broken down by rarity, and in this case we have 17 common, 14 rare, 9 epic. Of course, the higher the rarity, the better the rewards, but majority of the nodes are going to be bits and pieces of fragments of Basim here, so 5, 10, maybe 15 here and there. I forget exactly how the breakdown is, haven't done one of these in a while, but nonetheless, you're going to get, you could get up to all of these rewards if you flip the entire deck, on top of guaranteeing yourself the champion. One of the main gimmicks of Decks of Fate is that if you get 3 of a kind in a row, i.e. the common, rare, or the epics, then you get to roll on these respective tables and try your luck at some of these juicy rewards. Unfortunately, this iteration of the Deck of Fate does not have any pinning feature, so you cannot preserve a streak, which would guarantee you some of these, so it's just basically just up to RNG whether or not you can get 3 of a kind in a row. And then here near the bottom, you can see the breakdown of the table, showcasing the Gear Hunters aspect, as well as the Soulstone summoning. And as I like to describe it, this has a nerf applier of 70%, meaning that these redemption values for Soulstones are 70% of the peak values that we've seen. So the peak values being 100 for Immortal, 1,000 for an Immortal, and then 5,000 for an Eternal. So we're at 70% of that. So 70 for Immortal, 700 for an Immortal, and then 350 for an Eternal. And again, that's the predominant way you're going to be getting points if your goal is to get the champion, and the Dungeon Divers can kind of just fill in maybe 3 to 4 cards over the course of the 4 days. Now, from a practical standpoint, it will on average take you, I think, like 36 to 39 cards to guarantee yourself the champion. So more often than not, you're going to have to go all the way out to 40 flips or nearly there. So plan on doing so if your goal is to go for the champion. But real quickly, let's just talk about the champion and whether or not he might be worth it. It kind of depends. If you just want to get him because he's an assassin, then he's obviously worth it. But in terms of his kit, on the A1, it's a double hitter. He can place a weaken, but it has 100% chance if he's under a Veil of Perfect Veil, which he does have in his kit, unlike some of the other assassins. He can also debuff spread, placing it one random debuff from the target on all enemies. So it could be the weaken that he placed himself, or it could be something else, kind of depends. And then this will have 100% chance once again if he's under a veil. Let's jump to the A3 first, because that sets up his other abilities. But this is attacks one enemy 2 times. It deals 5% more damage for each buff and debuff on this champion, as well as for each buff and debuff on the target, all the way up to 100%. So you could do double damage if the stars align, so to speak. But more importantly, you get to attack someone, then you place a perfect veil on yourself for 3 turns and grants an extra turn, which means you can immediately go, this is on a 4-turn cooldown when booked, but you can immediately go into his AoE attack that has some built-in ignore defense, 15%, but more likely than not, you're going to be able to access the 30% defense ignore because he's going to be under a veil, because you're probably going to lead off with the A3 extra turn ability once again. And then he has 100% chance when booked on a 3-turn cooldown of placing AoE block active skills, which is super solid, but more importantly, it will ignore block debuffs if he's under that veil, which again, he will be from the A3. So it's a very unique set of skills that can bypass block debuffs and still place block active skills, which could be good against certain champions. Mythical champions come to mind as well. But yeah, it's really, really strong to be able to ignore block debuffs, of course. But at the same time, though, or I guess on the flip side, is he really going to be like a super meta champion in PvP? Probably not, but he definitely could be useful in PvE as an attack-based champion with a decent form of CC in his kit. Of course, he has the same everything is permitted passive, where whenever an enemy gets a certain gets below a HP threshold, you do bonus damage. And then The other passive here is that whenever this champion is attacked, he will steal 1 random buff from the attacker and transfer 1 random debuff from this champion to the attacker. So kind of a buff and debuff swap thing going on there. And it will ignore polymorph. So every time that happens, you will not get sheeped, which is kind of nice. We need more of these types of passives in the game, or at least more champions who can not get sheeped. Just a little bit more of a nerf to the polymorph and or sheeping abilities in the game. And then this will ignore 25% of the target's resistance when trying to do the steal and the transfer. To be fair, it's both. When he's under a veil or prevail, again, he should be as long as you take a turn and use the A3. So he's a fairly unique champion, and he can be useful for a lot of people depending upon your needs, but of course it just kind of depends what you're looking for in a champion. So if you are interested in getting this champion, then let's hop over to my lovely spreadsheet here, which will be linked in the description box down below, and you can check this out for yourself. We are in the Deck of Fate calculator tab. There are multiple tabs in the spreadsheet, so just be forewarned. But the main thing that you should take note of here is the Gear Hunters section here, which just breaks down the amount of the average amount of currency per run and per energy you would get for running each of the typical dungeon stages. So normal mode 20, normal 24, normal 25, hard mode 6, and hard mode 10, as well as if you were to run the campaign, you get a little bit. Obviously, it's a lot less than running dungeons, but you still get credit if you were to be running the campaign for whatever reason. And then when it comes to the items here over here on the right hand side, the main thing we need to look at is the Soulstone summoning tab. So once again, we have the nerf applier of the 70%. We have the values that we talked about earlier. And then if you wanted to convert all 40 flips into each tier individually of Soulstone, it'd be 572 mortals, which is a lot, 58 immortals, which is also a lot, and then 12 eternals, which is a ridiculous amount unless you're a big spender. So realistically, the only way you'd be able to do this is if you have a decent stockpile of mortals to burn through, you have a decent savings of immortals to burn through, and then maybe you have a couple eternals in terms of superior or whatever they're called, soul coins that you can convert into Soulstones. Or again, you just spend money. Not recommended, but you could do that if you didn't want to guarantee yourself the champion. But yeah, it's definitely going to be on the more expensive side. I always like to mention that the infamous Freya Deck of Fate that got a lot of people bent out of shape, myself included, was at 60% of the peak value. So this is a little bit better than that, but not much better, 10%, I guess you could say. So it's still pretty rough in terms of the expenditure required, but it's not the absolute worst that we've ever seen. So yeah, make of that what you will. Now, in terms of my particular plan in this instance, I actually don't even have to care about this Deck of Fate because I got super lucky there during, I guess it was the last Sacred Pogo event, where I just happened to get him from a Sacred Shard. And so I have Basim on my account, so just by nature of that, I don't have to participate at all in this Deck of Fate. But if I did not have him, just because I have a personal goal of wanting to collect all the assassins, I would have gone for this, and I would have burned pretty much not all of my soul stones, but good god, these pop-ups. But I would have burned a decent amount of my soul stones. I have 450 immortals, I have 11 immortals here, but I also have 50 immortals here. So some combination of those two. I don't have any eternals at the moment. I just spent all of my coins on a 6-star Mary Soul, which I think is a lot more important. Let me know if you disagree in the comment section down below. But yeah, I would have spent some combination of the mortals and immortals to get it done. So I just got lucky in this instance that I didn't really have to worry about that. And I guess long term that kind of helps me, because when it comes to these types of events, Raphael had the Deck of Fate, Leonardo had a Hero's Path, and then April had a Titan event. So I'm a little bit more confident now that I don't have to worry at all about using soul stones in order to get myself one of these champions, some of the other assassins that I'm missing, that being Bayek and Edward. But we'll see what Plarium has planned for us. But at least for me, I got lucky that I don't have to participate in this particular Deck of Fate. But nonetheless, I will still be participating in the Null Jewel Fusion here. You can see here the Fragment Summon. You can see I'm just over halfway, 55. So I will be farming Fire Knight, I think is the current tournament going on right now. So I'll get some credit, get some flips, and maybe if I happen to get lucky and get some fragments anyways, then those will go toward High Mother Maud in terms of getting her in 4 more years. In terms of my formal recommendation, like I always say, because these events go on for multiple days, if you can just spend the first 3 days doing, equivalent of gear hunters, whatever you're doing. If you're working on the fusion or you're running the event dungeon or whatever it is, just spam your energy into that just to offset the cost. That way, again, you could probably get 3 to 4, maybe 5,000 points. That way you can get some flips, and then that just reduces the overall amount of Soulstones you'd have to invest if your goal was to get the champion. But of course, if you don't care about the champion, then this deck of fate is absolutely pointless. And if you do care about the champion, definitely try to do the dungeons first and then pull as many Soulstones as you feel comfortable with trying to get him, because it's a fixed cost. Thankfully, you don't have to worry about RNG. The downside, though, of doing so, obviously the good upside, you get the champion. The downside is that there's no boosted rates going on in the Altar of Souls, which is kind of unfortunate. I think they had the boosted rates during the Titan event when it was a different deck of fate, but there was no champion in it. So it's kind of unfortunate that you have the high cost of trying to get the champion combined with the base rates of summoning from your Soulstones. So it's a bit of a rip. So that is just quite an unfortunate combination of these events and whatnot. But yeah, that is going to do it for the free-to-play review of the Master Deck of Fate. Let me know in the comment section down below what your plan is relative to this deck of fate. Are you going to skip it because you don't care about the champion, or do you plan to dump all of your Soulstones into the ether to try and get him on your account? Again, he could be useful depending upon your needs, but I also think he's not going to be like super PvP meta or anything like that. As always, if you did find this video helpful, then be sure to hit that like button down below. It really does help out the channel, and feel free to hit the subscribe button down below as well, if and only if you're enjoying the content overall on this channel, for more content just like this one in the future. Thanks for watching, and have a good one.